Perfect. I think now we are live. I'm waiting for everybody to come and join us. We are now live. All right. Karibuni sana. We go through this document. We make sure it works. Let me adjust the lighting. Why is that? That thing. Everybody, karibu. We have this important document to look through, to read through at least. And I want to take you through how we are going to approach this. I already gave you an idea. Basically, we are going to do what the president has requested. Have a conversation, participate, talk about this. And I think Jota Imekuja, right? Talk about the document, Vision2060. What is it about? Okay, road to Singapore, so to speak. But more importantly, we want to build up, or at least be able to do a narrative that reflects this community, that reflects another perspective, and also answer critical questions on each live session. So as you go through this, I encourage you to ask questions, to chat. The chat is open. And for those who are going to watch this on replay, please continue having more and more conversations, because if you ask questions, then I can come back and answer. So I'll make sure this is something we can answer. So just to give you a heads up, this is what we are going to be talking about this time. Basically, I want to cover, we are going to look at, sorry, this is actually not the document, excusez-moi. We are going to look at how this is going to take shape in the next 2 weeks, I think. I think we are going to have 2 weeks at most. It can't be more than 2 weeks. And within that time, one of the things we have to agree with ourselves is that the reason we have huge, I don't want to call it huge failure, but yeah, the reason we have a bit of a huge failure is because we are, when the documents are set, they are set based on definitions that come not from ourselves, but come from what the ruling class want us to have. So just to do an introduction, before this paper came out, I went through specific aspects of this document, and my analysis was that it has all the pretty words. It says oil development, industrialization. It does what people should do. It does a case study, but at no time. First, there is such a huge lie on history. Secondly, a lot of things have been left out, right? We don't even have physical things. It is very much reliant on what I would call technocratic, like somebody's in an office imagining what a country far away that they've never visited looks like. And that is why you don't see the reality of Kenya being reflected, and not just reality, history. Another thing that is not handled, which I think is very important, is counties. The fact that we can have a vision document that treats counties, which are the centers of production, as peripheral elements, as if the national government is the head and counties are the tail, while it should be the opposite. Counties produce to serve the national government, but the national government, its work is basically to manage the country, but we are unable to see that. So those are some of the things we are going to look at. But one other thing that we are going to look at is, of course, the people who are complaining about history versus present, right? When I did the video yesterday talking what the president said, it's as if William Ruto wants Kenyans to stop looking at the present, even the past, and basically focus on the future. Now, this on another day would be a problem, but he's even asking us to work with nations, or to consider nations that are in Asia that have very specific historical lessons that we can learn from as Kenyans. So today in the analysis, we talked about our inability to consider our history as a problem, but our colonial history is also a problem. Anyway, with that, let us look at now, at least you have this document. If you don't have this document, please join the group. The group has this document, but I think I'll be able to add show notes here to take you so that you can look at it. This document is only for people who are in the group. So now, without further ado, 5 minutes in, because I really didn't want to take so much time, let us look at the document, and we'll go through it at least for the next hour. So if you have questions, make sure to ask. If you have anything to say, please do, and let us proceed. I will be alternating between reading and explaining, because it is really not so wordy, but by wordy I mean you can kind of guess what it's about. So this is what the document looks like. This is what the president was launching on the other night, right? The day after the blackout. We'll never forget that one. He launched the vision the day after the blackout. So the document is called Developing a New Vision for Kenya Towards a First World Nation. So this is the strategic guidelines for long-term national transformation. So in other words, the final document is yet to be out. This is how the government wants to lead the conversation. And so if this is how the government wants to lead the conversation, then it is up to us to make sure that the next thing that is being led does not start with them. It does not. We have a say in this. Now, if you're wondering, and I'm sure some of you might be wondering, it has very little. The guidelines are also very little. I don't know if they were looking for, what do you call it, to be minimalistic, but let's look at the introduction, because the table of content kind of gives you an idea of what to expect, so that since this is the first one, in case somebody just watches the first one, they can have a good understanding. So we have the usual stuff, the preface, the executive summary. Then we go to why Kenya needs a new vision. And this is a very interesting wording, why Kenya needs a new vision, as if, because when Ruto was speaking, when the president was presenting this, it was like, we are continuing from Vision 2030. So it's not so much needs a new vision, it's continuing. But the most important thing when you look at this is, has the current vision, why has the current vision failed, and why is the failure being identified in the fourth to last year, right? Because it's 2030, today is 2026. We have about 3 and something years to get there. So that's important. Then they goes to Kenya's development paradox, the many false starts. So let us look at what they are calling the false starts, and if they are, because they are saying it's a paradox, like Kenya has had start, stop, start, stop, start, stop. So we'll quickly look at this and then go on to the next. So they say the economic planning of Kenya from 1964 to 2004. First of all, I would think, so they have 2 phases, which is very important. They say agricultural growth without industrial transition. This is between 1964 and 1980. But if we look at that period, 1964 to 1980, basically we could put up to around 80, even up to 88. Kenya was steadily growing. We had actually moved from a lot of industrial growth, agricultural growth, because the other thing that you'll find that is very disappointing is that they only seem to focus on agriculture. They don't recognize that by then Kenyans were making clothes. Okay, it's agriculture based, but it's more than that. Pharmaceuticals, okay, some of them came from pyrethrum, but you get, there was more than that. Blankets, we made paper, we made, what's it called? Juakali. We made things made out of steel and iron. We were actually on our way there. That it's not recognized. But more than that, there were a lot of cottage industries that came up from the Kenyan economy. And this is also omitted very thoroughly. Now, let us look at the other document, that's the other phase, which is the macroeconomic decline and structural adjustment between 1980 to 2002. Structural adjustment programs came in 1986. Their first documented implementation is sometimes in 89 towards 90. That's when they said Kopei education, Kopei healthcare, break up Kenya refinery. You can also see what the Americans and the West was really looking to capture in Kenya, because from the early things that they really started capturing, because they were looking in 10, 15 years, we are going to make sure we own all the healthcare, or at least we are someplace. We are going to own education, we are going to own the energy, we are going to own telecommunications, because those are the things they started splitting. And we are going to own the oil, and we are going to make this a consumer oil market alone. So this is very important when you look at, because now it helps you to see what was happening. But remember Then they say phase 3 is means transition, infrastructure-led recovery without productive transformation between 2005 and 2030. No. Between 2005 and 2030, we deindustrialized. We killed the manufacturing that had been going on because now we killed all the factories. We made power inaccessible to most Kenyans. It cannot be used as a productive unit. We killed healthcare. By now, healthcare is gone. It's stolen, not killed, but stolen. But it's killing. So this time, they are putting infrastructural-led recovery. What does infrastructure-led recovery? It means they were building pretty roads and houses, which has led to huge land speculation, which has led to life inflating even further and higher. A lot of people, particularly from central Kenya, from Rift Valley, even some places in western Kenya, are being priced out of their home so that it can create urban centers. And this is a danger because these were agriculture-rich areas, simply because it is only the quote-unquote viable form of investment available to Kenyans. Now, I hope you can see why this is a false representation of even the current history. Up to 2030, they have represented history very differently. For some reason, they don't want to interrogate that. Yet, if you say this is going to be the one taking over, then it means it is already built on a false foundation. Second part, in the paradox, they say economic recovery strategy for wealth and employment creation, ERS. They created an advisory body. Oh, we will look at this. Because the government of Kenya, somebody seemed to have lied to the government of Kenya that results are done by creating bodies. You kill public transport, you create NTSA or some other thing to manage transport. You kill this, you create a body. NCA for you kill construction, civil works, right? But you create National Construction Authority that trains people to do, but it doesn't deliver. So here, instead of actually doing actual economic recovery, recovering the factories, recovering the work that was done, recovering public transportation, you create a body whose work is to study what you did. The foolishness of this, it is as if they are trying to say, we don't know what is happening. And these things keep being complemented and implemented through these technical working groups. Most of these advisories are literally led by the World Bank and IMF. The people who fractured our economy are the same ones now who want this to be addressed. And this is a challenge. Then they talk of Kenya Vision 2030. They say this is a false start. So what did Vision 2030 do? Progress in implementing Kenya Vision 2030. Economic pillar, we look at what they say has grown economically. Because remember, it was on pillars. I know these ones offered because of having been there. Social pillar, political pillar, and foundational pillar. Then challenges of implementation. Let us look at these challenges that the current government administration has identified. So they say failure to achieve GDP growth targets. Akimi nasikianga GDP. Because GDP as a target is not aimed at you, it's aimed at borrowing. It's aimed at borrowing. At no place here are you going to see we did not hire people. We stopped providing healthcare. We stopped providing water. Water actually became so scarce, it's almost as some people have never taken water outside a plastic bottle in Kenya. And yet we have clean water and streams. These are the things some people, you saw Gen Zs wondering how we had public transport. So instead of saying that, you say GDP. I know it's an all-exclusive thing, but what is being produced in Kenya, when you have all this speculative economy, particularly when we talk about real estate and other things being the ones that are being speculated, being pushed, then we have a problem as Kenyans, because these things don't actually lead to growth. Who is this that is bringing their money? Kenya is a renter economy, right? All capitalist investors come here, they rent our land, they rent our people. Look at AI training. Look at Rent Mzungu. Look at all these things. They come, they rent, and they go. Nothing stays. That is why the jobs are not permanent. If you're talking of economic challenges and you don't even mention something to do with the people, kuna shida. Look at the next one. Infrastructure, remarkable progress but with large gaps. Hata wangesema gaps, wangesema cost. Because this thirst for generating infrastructure infrastructure that has no value, and I don't mean value in that it is useless, it means it does not ease mobility of Kenyans. They expanded Thika Road, but mobility was constrained even further. They did the SGR, the express, they do all these fancy projects, but people, it's not like it becomes cheaper or easier or better for Kenyans to move. Yet Kenyans are put under loans. I hope you can see the paradox. The paradox is actually in that focus on infrastructure. This infrastructure doesn't seem to cover other things that are relevant for mobility. The railway station was removed. The drainage and other verticals, all gone, that are infrastructural. We don't even have infrastructure now that leads to production. For example, canals and furrows and irrigation schemes. Hatuna. Moving on. Moving on. Right. So we have raising the standard and longevity of years in school. I have talked about this. We have reduced our quality of education, first of all, because most of the children in Kenya now are going through private schools. When you go to a private school, a couple of things are missing. One, a lot of children now in those very expensive schools, not quotes, very expensive schools, playtime, activities, and even quality of education, because they are not being managed like government or public schools. Delivery sometimes is on the whim of the owners and directors. The other thing is, besides that, the ones in public schools have to suffer that they might learn and never even go to a good high school, because now the private schools are able to stream or find their paths to national schools. Then people are kept in school for longer, but it doesn't translate to employment. It doesn't translate to employment. Because why are we saying we have all these people who are educated, but we have 80% unemployment for young people? And that's the challenge. Moving on, they talk about agriculture checkered progress. Apana. It's not even progress, it's actually worse. Within the last 15 years since Kibaki, we've introduced 4 or 5 more slave crops, but we've never done any food crop that can feed Kenyans. Let me repeat that. Since 2005, the time they're talking of this vision, we've increased more slave crops, in that we are growing these crops not for consuming in Kenya, but to export to the West and other markets, but not food for Kenyans. These are macadamia. You saw what Uhuru did with macadamia with that policy. Avocado. They've also taken the mango. Then they went to the nuts, the cashew nuts, the what, a lot of that went, right? And then we have now the chilies and the fancy foods. Not for feeding in Kenya. And some of this require a lot of irrigation. It's not checkered progress. It's actually de-progress. We are now producing less food to feed more people. And we need to feed more people. That is why food is becoming more expensive, because we are being fed by Uganda and Tanzania. Even DRC Congo is feeding Kenya. Kenya cannot feed itself, because the fertile farmlands are chasing for that European export. And even Nukambani has been putting, pixies and oranges. So those farmlands now are taken by crop that is expected to be bought by somebody in another country who has tariffs, who changes, and that is the West that is going on in this country. So that every January, every other harvest season, people are crying and crying over these crops because there's no market. And yet, we can feed ourselves. We can't feed ourselves, sorry. And finally, public debts and reduced revenue. Yeah. Reduced revenue because they sold everything. Like, whoever was writing this could have actually gone through this and said, we sold everything, we privatized everything. Then there's no more revenue to come. And the reason for public debt is because now, first of all, they check the corruption, where things are more expensive. We talked about that in infrastructure. But it doesn't lead to consumption, to production. So you build a road, but it is not leading to improved production of the country. And therefore, it becomes more and more expensive to service that debt. But remember, it was also exaggerated. But more importantly, and the final thing on that debt and reduced income is, we are now going to keep taxing more and more people, raising the inflation, and so increasing consumerism. The government is basically in its own death cycle. it is basically making Kenyans sink deeper and deeper into worse conditions simply by the things that have happened. And that is why the initial analysis that I did after that speech was he forgets the current position of Kenya has come due to a series of, first of all, decisions in the past, but more importantly, especially when it comes to Vision 2030, this is happening because this is what Vision 2030 was meant to achieve under the structural adjustment programs and the neoliberal policies introduced in that time. That's it. So Vision 2030 has literally achieved its goal. There is no way we can say we are going to have universal healthcare while healthcare is all privatized. Like, how? The owners of the businesses will not allow it. Same as education. It will become more expensive and unattainable. That is a fact. All right. Moving on. So I'm not going to touch on beta, bottom up, apana. He is party airtime for now. Let us move on to the real document. Now, I want to see if you have any questions. Let's see how best to put this so that my image, we can do, oh, I apologize. I'm still new, working out this. So we are out of the main topic, of the main chapter. Let us now go to the next. I'm not going to touch on this. I wanted to, because today we are in the introduction. The time we'll go into the deeper ones, we will touch on those. So for your information, some of the things that include the pillars, we'll look into that. How successful countries have transformed, enabling factors of infrastructure, human capital, and state capability. Whatever these people are interpreting as state capability is very different, actually almost 100% from what those countries considered state capability. Secondly, they talk of transforming agriculture, productivity, and food security. Agriculture is very different from productivity. Food security, agriculture and food security to feed the people, not for export. Productivity is a different thing. Productivity is our ability to put A, B, C, D, and it brings results. Productivity can be for mining, can be for transportation. Productivity is the ability to achieve results. It's not this kind of nonsense. And being with agriculture, sure, you can be productive in agriculture, but they are putting that together. Anyway, those are semantics. Then they go to industrialization, labor-intensive manufacturing for exports. That is true. But they forget, before these people manufactured for export, all of them, they first manufactured for domestic market because that is what stabilized their currency. Let me explain. Right now, when Ruto was saying, oh, our currency has stable, the shilling and the dollar is at a stable rate, is because the clothes we wear, everything we buy comes from outside. And that means we must always be looking at the dollar. And that means everything in Kenya is priced and dealt with according to the dollar. Medicine, everything, clothes, shoes, even construction materials. So anything can rise. And right now with the dollar being so unstable and considering it's going to change soon, then using this as a measure, China did not use that. Same as Vietnam. They first made themselves stable so that you find food, maize is like 5 shillings. But that 5 shillings has a profit to the farmer. So how do you achieve a level of production where maize is 5 shillings as green maize? You do 2 things. One, you can't bring any more maize so that now the current farmers can first increase their production, because the more you increase production, the more your factors, your economies of scale improve and you can produce at a cheaper rate because of bulk purchases and the rest. Now, if that becomes the case, then you can tell next year if Kenyans knew there would be no more potatoes, no more onions or whatever coming from Uganda, Tanzania, then they are going to boost their production. And that starts bringing things down. And the innovation around cost management comes lower. Then Kenyans buy more so that things are not going to waste, because sometimes whatever comes is competing with what's coming from the other country. And so if now that happens, farmers find they are pushing things. You even now issue market conditions to spur demand. For example, school children will eat from this. Hospitals and everything Kenyan, public institutions are given directives to go and consume from the Kenyan farmer. So we now support the farmer so that we can be food secure as a nation. So food starts becoming cheaper because people are producing more, the factors of production are becoming cheaper, especially the inputs, and the technology is better, and so on and so forth. So you achieve that stable ground so that you're not going to be waiting for wheat to come from Russia, a war zone, so that we can feed ourselves. That is the issue. So they are not able to first realize, and that is why one of the dialectics we had, we said, and we had a full analysis, that agriculture first as a developmental agenda has never industrialized any nation. It is agriculture plus. So that now in the plus here, you are having the agriculture growing alongside, say, textiles. We are going to use textiles, or we are going to use money. Let's use those because they are affordable and reachable to Kenya. Sorry, accessible to Kenyans, and is something that is well known. So if you decide agriculture, food security, and then textiles are the industry that we are going to push because they have not put that, then you realize as you grow your maize, but there is cotton, which means even your investment on the irrigation schemes and even mobilizing the entire nation, towards production, towards building furrows and channels and other elements of production becomes easier. But you're able to mobilize what you call the technical or educated population, because not everybody is going for those cheap labor, cheap jobs, through government financing now into the secondary, the ginneries, the spinners, and all these things before you even go to textile. So their industrialization was done with those two things: mobilizing the economy so that you plan around it. You plan around agriculture as one of it, but it is supported by a real industry where you can easily and immediately import. If you grew cotton this year and Kenya stopped importing cotton, then first of all, it's a huge saving on the nation. But you can find next year you'll have enough yarn or fiber left to start selling. This would be a 1 or 2 year turnover. Go to leather, the same. Leather can actually be changed and transformed within a year, because all the skins then, the technology and the growth of the industry. So you are still promoting animal husbandry, because farming, milk, and all these things are important, and meats, and you're looking at that. But at the same time, you're pushing an industry. And then now you start pushing others, especially in the arid and semi-arid regions of Kenya. You're pushing things like not just livestock, but also silkworms and other things that can survive there. They don't need that much investment in irrigation schemes and the rest of the things. But look at Mount Kenya, look at Rift Valley, places that are very cold, Kisii. Then you'd go to something like sheep farming, right? Now, sheep farming for mutton is good, but with mutton and skin as the industrial product, it's better, because we need the meat, the mutton, we need it to taikula. Most of it, some will go for export, but it will never be enough to industrialize. And this is the paradox that Kenyans have never understood, because when we were colonized and the settlers came to Kenya, they created a settler economy for extracting agricultural produce to take to Britain and Netherlands and other countries, because a lot of people don't know that relationship. And so what happened was, those slave crops, so there was first the coffee, the tea, and then later sugar came and so on. But sugar was not for export. So coffee, tea, and flowers. The Dutch took the flowers. And then we had the tea and the coffee and sisal and a couple of others. So they were growing them for their factories. And then when people said, let's come again, you can even be able to connect the dot with the avocado, the house avocado, the banana. Not so much the banana. The pixie mangoes, the pixie oranges, the mangoes, the cashew nuts, all these things, and macadamia, they are being introduced by donors. They are being introduced by NGOs. They are not being introduced for food security, and that is one of the things we mentioned earlier. So that now we are repeating the same mistake as the white man, as the colonizer. We are doing the same thing that they had done to colonize Kenya, to take our farmlands, to provide for them food, rather than us being able to feed ourselves. One of the things we always say about food production is that for the Kamba, their first drought, famine, came with the rail. It is called Lelo. Like the road brought people, actually the ongoing thing was that the road brings famine. Because when the road came, its food stopped being available. That's what happened. to them. So because now everything was being captured and taken away, we are still operating with that mentality. And that is why for African nation, because their policies are set by the Western nations and all these donors and development partners and technical working groups, because right now, go to anything to do with agriculture, because USAID left is GIZ, Danida, all these people. They are the ones who lead, they are sponsoring them. They are looking at everything. Why? Why? They come here for the resource. And that resource is to make sure we keep providing all the fresh fruits, all the black tea, whatever they want. The USAID, not USAID, the World Aid, that fundraising for famine in Ethiopia happened when they had a lot of crop in their farms, but they could not eat it because it had been subcontracted by those same people. They had lentil and other crops that they could not consume themselves. A lot of farms have a lot of crops that we cannot consume. And they are also in the most fertile of regions. And not necessarily fertile right now, because that has also been destroyed, but in the places that are best for agriculture with minimal effort like irrigation. Then, to make matters worse, let's talk about the dirt. Because the video that I shared today that was talking about the MP who was saying, oh, the Netherlands, things like flower farming, the power they take and the chemicals they've dumped in our rivers and water resources, and then the pollution, and the fact that they have no satiation. And Kenyans get value of less than 10% from that business is concerning. It is still the same extraction. And so that is the issue with agriculture. First, as a policy for development, it is being coached to us so that we can keep providing them the raw materials they still need. It is agriculture plus. Agriculture should stop being the primary thing, because they keep saying, oh, there are still agricultural people, they've never industrialized. Like we said, we had. Go back and refer. I'll make sure I put timers here. Finally, technology and innovation. Technology and innovation is very diverse and very interesting. After you build industry, we don't make the mistakes of China 1, where you get such expensive machinery and then think it will develop you. If the rest of the state planning is not done accordingly, it will fail. Let's take a current failing institution or sector. Look at the AI crash, the bubble that is happening, because everybody was pushing to that frontier technology of godlike intelligence. At the risk, they literally sabotaged a lot of other sectors within that economy to achieve that issue. They sabotaged their waters. They sabotaged electricity. That pushed inflation so high in the US. Air pollution, ground pollution, and housing. Housing and real estate got affected because now venture capitalists were going to are investing more for houses for building data centers. And so you design an entire economy to focus on something like that. And that is the challenge we have in Kenya. When you talk of innovation, what is the basis? What is it pushing? And then financing production. Kibaki did this in the worst way possible. He took Kenya's money, put it in private banks. Some of these Kenyan banks grew because they were financed by the people of Kenya. They took that private capital. Look at the women enterprise funds, what fund, youth empowerment. They were put, and people are told, now go take loans that are now being given at commercial rates. And yet we had banks. We had Post Bank, we had National Bank, and I think Consolidated Bank, or Consolidated came from other banks being consolidated. But there was National Bank, but the money was not going to them. It was not going to those banks that could have been managed by the government, being the biggest shareholder, so that it is at 2 or 3% to spur financing. Hakuna kitu kama hiyo. And finally, key lessons from successful transformation. If we are going to learn from China, but we are not going to do what they did, or Vietnam, or Singapore, or whoever else that they have put here, then it's a waste of time and space. We are just being lied to. There's a heaven like China that you can achieve, but they don't want to put in the work that is needed for us to get there. So finally, we look at the roadmap. Hii siangalii saa hii because it will be a surprise for us as we get there. And so moving on now, This document was done very deliberately by Peter Anyang' Nyong'o, because Peter Anyang' Nyong'o was involved in that national restoration, financial restoration program that happened in under Mwai Kibaki. And so it's like we are bringing the people who are the architects of Kenya's structural capture by neoliberal policies to institute the same policies, or at least to give the forward of the path forward. Rinse, repeat. What is Anyang' Nyong'o doing here? And they keep doing that, the same people, the same time. So let us hear what Anyang' Nyong'o has to say, and I'll read very quickly. Anyang' Nyong'o, is it this year? He says, His Excellency President Ruto has consistently underscored the urgent need to move Kenya from the status of lower middle income country to that of a first world nation in our generation. That is a good ambition. With 80% unemployment, with a lot of Kenyans now not owning land and factors of production, more Kenyans leaving the country. The president's concern has coincided with the impending end of Kenya Vision 2030, which has been the guiding light for long-term development planning in a country. Yeah, no, I don't want to read all this sucking up, but it's important to see how much can be sucked up in a nation. All this, by the way, is basically them congratulating themselves. Let me use polite words because this is YouTube. Congratulating themselves on this. That's about it. That's about it. Hakuna kitu ingine inaendelea hapo. Anyway, in November, so it's the history of the document. The document presents the first step towards the preparation of that plan. A synopsis of it was presented to the president last January. So this is basically the agenda of how this will be done. This was the Kenya Vision 2030, which was inaugurated in a grand coalition government in 2008. It has 4 years left to run. So the report proposes, now this one, a pathway towards the preparation for a fully fledged plan for Kenya's transition. That's about it. This is a proposal, and it's a proposal built on lies, built on a false history, built on without even acknowledging what has happened in Kenya in an honest way that the real citizens felt. Because one of the other challenges you'll ever come across when you deal with the high-level meetings and government people is that the experience of Kenya, either deliberately or for some reason, maybe they are coached to stop seeing Kenya as a real place. People are suffering. In fact, they call people voters. Or how? They stop seeing that and they live in a different world that is manufactured. Because they hold their meetings in hotels in places Kenyans are not. They live in estates Kenyans are not. We are not saying they should live together, but their life becomes very much removed very easily, because if you are the ruling class and if you are the elites who are running this country, you become part of the eating party and you are removed from the people. Because the way we take our children from primary, the bright ones, and take them far away is the same thing. They want you to be removed so that you can live in a different world and be exposed to it in such a shock therapy moment that you by the time you open your eyes, you are either too used to it or you don't know what you have been doing here for such a long time. So let us look at this synopsis that has been presented. The synopsis is the first world status. Number one, where Kenya stands today. Let us see if Anyang' Nyong'o, because this is his story, is right. Kenya says lower middle income economy per capita of less than income of $2,200. $2,200. Poverty and inequality challenges. Not challenges. It's normal. Manufacturing of less than 7.2% of GDP is from manufacturing. Productivity constraints remain, of course. Energy, transport, water, laws, policies, factors of production, financing, it's all captured. And then the education and the healthcare, all the social safety nets that you need to be a productive worker are taken from Kenyans. It's a struggle. It's literally hustling. Any job. Anyway, public service reform momentum has weakened. They keep reforming this public service, but it can't deliver. It doesn't deliver. Its work is to issue contracts and get people to work. Anyway. So, our destination. Let us look at the vision. High income industrialized economy. From what? If you're saying agriculture, how? Are you telling me we are going to process enough mangoes to become industrialized? Number 2, urbanized and global. What is this obsession with urbanization? Because one of the things we've realized about Kenya, okay, if you are to take a lesson from China, let's put China in your map, wherever you are. I don't know if I can get a map of China and just upload it here. Next time I'll have somebody assisting. If you take a map of China, you'll realize that if Kenya was that country, they have specialized, you can consider every city a city. But within that city or province, every province like a semi-country, because it's not federalistic like the US. So it's more like Kenya, right? They have the provinces and they have specialization. And even if there's a lot of people in the urban areas, but they're there for work. They're not just moving there. But Kenya's industrial growth, first of all, has to start from back to the soil. Because we've never done that. We are being pushed deeper and deeper into the city. Leaving the soils for who? Leaving the urban, the regional places for who? And that is one of the things I kept talking about when I said, we don't consider the counties as now the new structure of Kenya. We don't. And yet this is where the productive capacity is. Agriculture, mining, all these activities are there. Even the social structures, the training of people, not all the education, but the training and healthcare. Ziko kwa ground. They're in the counties. They're not here. Moving on. Productive jobs and rising income. I'm going to use Japan, although it's not part of it, and then I'm going to use China. Productive jobs, especially when people talk of productive jobs, productivity is a factor of many things. First of all, people have the skills. They also have the tools to do that, but they also have, more importantly, an environment that allows them to, whatever you produce has an end market. What do I mean by that? Even when China had so-called sweatshops, because Kenya wants to pretend we don't have those in the EPZ for AGOA, for us to produce textile that goes to the US. Even when they had the sweatshops, there was a market for that. There was a streamlining, even for the farmer. That's why we said we must first create local market. If we keep producing and things keep dying, or just dumping and loading and holding, there's nowhere to take them, then that also affects it. But the skilling of the Kenyan people is also very important, and this cannot happen in the ether. It must be supported in a very major way by the people, by the national planning of our education system and our training system. So not just saying people are in school doing what? They must be there to work, but decentralize this to the local productive economy so that people also are able to go to work easily. There is mobility and there is housing. And like they do also lunch and food, it doesn't become too expensive. That's about it. So innovation-led competitiveness. Yeah. Before you compete, you must train. That's what I have to say. I'll come back to that. But before even China brought us their things, or Vietnam or wherever, they first made them work. Before we can start saying we are going to compete with textiles from China, we must have won them here, tested them here, and then improved, or India, or Turkey. We can, but this takes time, and I know. Innovation towards competitiveness, before you compete, you must train. And that is true. But they want to show the measures of this. So the way they are putting the vision, it's as if somebody else is telling them what they have to do to improve them, to provide for them, to become the supplier, rather than it being what you call Africa first. It is not Africa gazing. We are being treated as if we are uncompetitive, as if even we don't matter as consumers. And yet, when Chinese products are coming here, when Indian products are coming here, when things are coming from Turkey or from the US, wherever, their technology and such, we are customers. We are customers, so competitiveness, we have a choice. But when we are the ones doing it, we must first be able to do it. You saw what happened with Tesla versus BTY, right? The EV vehicles. They first made them, they improved them, until now they are competitive. They've become competitive after they have been, first of all, used within that country for a number of years. When you started hearing of EV vehicles coming out of China, they're very good and so on and so forth. It was, but Tesla, but now everybody admits they're better. And everybody is taking them. That's what I mean. That's what you mean. You must first be able to be internally competent. To be, if a marathon runner just woke up and said it, I'll stereotype Kalenjins, I'm sorry. I'm a Kalenjin, naitwa Kipchirchir or whatever. Nitaenda kucompete. I'll even get it. And you do. Because you have a vision. And they'll take you because, hey, I come from Iten. Not just at just any place, I come from Iten. And they associate Iten with you. And they'll take you. And then you'll be the last. That's what they're trying to say. I'm sorry, Kipchirchir from Iten. If you ever come here. Then ethical and effective institutions. No. Meritocracy, capable. Capability. It's very different from ethical. Ethical. Ethics and business is a very different whatever. Meritocracy is ethical performance. That's what I would say. And this is, let me give the difference. When Uhuru Kenyatta became president, he employed a very highly educated Ivy League. It was degree show. It was degrees parading. Oh, I was here. I went to Harvard. I'm doing this World Bank. I'm a former what of the UN. Like that. That was like, they were trying to show this is what meritocracy looks like. And then they went to perform and they say, this person is bringing in these skills. And everybody went to work and they did their thing. And Uhuru Kenyatta was like, the next time we see Uhuru Kenyatta, he's coming here to say, I am defeated. Haki kwa Kenya, hebu nioneni vizuri nimeshindwa. Every day there is corruption. And he's the president. He's going in front of Kenyans, helpless and hopeless, as if he's unable to manage his people and his system. Yet these are the very educated people who are supposed to be ethical because they disclose their wealth, they do what, they have CG, work performance contract. It doesn't matter. That's what they do in the West. They promote exceptionalism of the individual over the system. So let us look at what a meritocracy, a true meritocracy looks like. It is not just we are going to hire you because you are good, but you are good for that job. Because Uhuru parading CVs, if you are getting a doctor to head the Ministry of Health, that doctor must also work with the rest of the people to be capable. Not just doctors, but medical personnel, and then the logistics and so on and so forth. We are not refusing. That means, as president, your entire Ministry of Health should be filled with capable people who understand the work for delivery. So that when the doctors and patients have a problem when it deals with health, they don't go to somebody and they don't know what they're doing. That's the first element. That is how you bring ethical performance. It is not based on because you went to World Bank, did 10 health-related projects that you're good. No. It is the fact that you're a professional who understands this business, this sector, and you can deliver. And then from there, the delivery is the other part of ethical performance, which means it must be inbuilt into the delivery. That is meritocracy. So what does that mean? Delivery is inbuilt in that if we are supposed to have universal healthcare, you as the minister, the CS of health, if there is no universal healthcare after 1 year, then you are fired. That means you must demonstrate that ability to deliver. You've been hired based on the Constitution, because also some people use the Constitution as if it is like the Bible. You saw that gossip. Like it's in the universal healthcare is a right, but they can't deliver. The Constitution of Kenya says universal healthcare. So then how do you make sure there is universal healthcare? You as the CES Health, your job and your only job is to ensure there is universal healthcare. Go resolve this. That means you must be technically capable and deliver. The responsibilities on you. So that if after 1 year, and you cannot be doing the way we are doing Vision 2030. We're interrogating Vision 2030 at its dawn, when it is ending, at the sunset. So this time, The CS currently, Adan Duale, for example, it's like, where is the universal healthcare? So I did, those are activities. It's like the difference between marketing and sales. Munaweza na mpige domo, but if you don't bring back the money, the check, then there's no department. There's no company. They've never delivered a single check. So even if this person, you saw them coming to swear on the Bible, on the Quran, they did that. But not single delivery. In fact, they keep taking more and more and more. And every next one comes, they are even more ethical. In other words, religious. It is camouflage. It is total, absolute camouflage. Finally. So effectiveness of the institution will never happen in Kenya. Because they measure, first of all, from paper. It's like, there we have the dollar system. We exchange real things and get a paper. That is the artificialness. Somebody has a paper, they are qualified, so they get the job. And a lot of civil servants, people work in public sector and donor world, keep pursuing more and more papers so that they can have those degrees. If you look at their qualifications, they have a lot of degrees, but they can't deliver real world things. And especially people who've come from donor world. That's why we have all this donor money every year, but we've never seen their impact in real world. You ask, how then do you have a nation of such educated people? Because when they go to other places, they have to deliver, they deliver. But for Kenya, never. As either NGOs or government, they never deliver. But mtu akiwa kwa biashara yake, sorry, in English, if somebody is in their business, they are able to deliver. And that is the paradox of tying ethics with effectiveness. Meritocracy demands that these ethics should not be the thing. It is, can you deliver, and you are responsible. So they are not serving the responsibility of it. It's like you wash your hands, you say, I was ethical and I was effective. I attended all meetings, I did all this and I did all this. If it doesn't deliver, then what? There is no accountability. Because it's just an extractive man. That's Vision 2030. That's the system. So they are implementing the same thing again. Finally, shared prosperity for all. William Ruto, Anyang Nyong, this is Anyang Nyong. If you want shared prosperity for all, first of all, give Kenyans back their land. Give us back our water. We can even farm enough so that we can say, no, Kenya is starving tomorrow. Then as government workers, no government worker should be working and they are subcontracting. If you are being paid, you've been employed in the Ministry of Health by Kenyans, you must be able to provide healthcare. Not going to lease equipment or for people to work, or going to get your friend to get the contract to do the cleaning services in that. Those are the only people making money or benefiting from the taxpayer money that is going to do healthcare. We are on the 1 hour mark or close to that. I don't know if we have questions. Let's see about any comments. Made in Kenya, consumed in Kenya. Wanjiru, we can be self-sustaining. Exactly. Wanjiru, I am very happy for this comment, because just from the introduction alone, you have been able to see we were self-sustaining because by the time Kibaki was president, Kenya was under sanctions. By the way, kuna vitu hatungepata, but we were making them here. But they opened up, then it looked good. There was this glut. Then reality hit. They are opening us for plunder, for extraction, to come and take over, and they have. So that is the Kenya we have today. Even this policy is outward facing, and that is the challenge we have as Kenyans. So I don't know how to take a break. Can somebody tell me how to take a break, like 10 minutes or 5 minutes? Show comments on stage. Let's see. Yeah, all right. So one of the other paradoxes of Made in Kenya is what Uhuru Kenyatta tried to introduce, right? He tried to introduce, what did he introduce? The bracelets, a couple of Kenyan things. But because they were not supported by all the other elements of policy, of national planning, Kenyans cannot afford them. That is a tragedy of thinking you can save things just by, because it's like the way rich people do, like, huyo ni shida ni pesa tu. But hata labda sio pesa vile. Sure, pesa itasaidia, but it's not. So it's like Kenyans, let's just made, it's a PR exercise. Made in Kenya by Kenyans for whatever reason. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow. All right. Moving on. Let's have the final of this. I'm back to look at lessons from successful countries. Agriculture, no. No. Anyang Nyong'o, no. Industry, exports, innovation, especially when here's Singapore there and other countries. Lessons from other countries are food. Food. Food is very different from agriculture, especially the way it's been coined here. So I want to draw that difference. I'm not saying we don't make our food, no. I'm saying food production and industry, exports. No. No. Innovation. Okay, into export, yeah. But that being the focus is, first of all, being able to feed domestic market. I don't know how we can come back, and Wanjiru was right, self-sustaining. You must first become self-sustaining. Then you realize the most of your excesses come as a result of that self-fulfilling cycle of increased and improved production. That is the first lesson that every other person who is dealing with this document, and that is a question we will have to submit on this, that where is the path for us first to be self-sustaining? Tunawezaje sema we are going to supply the world without even knowing how to supply ourselves? That means you're planning to first to keep the markets open, and Kenyans then will never have a time to be able to create their systems. Yes, yes, Kiro, Peter, they are literally cooked. We looked at this from the introduction. These policies are, all of them, they are funded by World Bank, the development partners. They are in the technical groups that are developing this. That is why when they are addressing structural adjustment programs and Vision 2030, which was also funded by the same people, so the people who are the architects of your downfall are making your other vision. So yes, that is how. Any thoughts on the energy sector? I'm listening to your perspective. Yes, thank you. Let us take a break because now we go. Energy sector. As we are looking at some of the first sectors to fall, energy was among the first. It was healthcare. When you introduced this, so I'll not do a recap because now you're here, you're asking questions. When they introduced these structural adjustment programs, they went for key sectors that lead to quick investment by venture capitalists. But quick doesn't mean immediate. It meant that they were going to use NGOs and other systems or privatization, what is easy to privatize, so that in 10, 15 years, it can be, they can now have a stake and a way to now break the government and break Kenya, so that we can deindustrialize, and now they make us customers for their products and we don't have any ability to produce. So besides health and education, because you need those ones to go first, it was energy. I'll put energy and then I explain how. We had two elements of energy when they came. We had Kenya Power. The Kenya Power was one. KenGen was as a result of the breakup. No, so Kenya Power was one. Let's first start with that. And then you had, what is the other one called? Changamwe Oil Refineries, and then Kenya Pipeline. So refinery was producing crude oil from crude to finished products. Now the diesel, the paraffin, whatever, paraffin, petrol, whatever it is. So there was Changamwe and then the pipeline. So that's how energy in Kenya was managed. Those three elements: Kenya Power for electricity for homes, refining the oil, the crude that came, and then the third was now pipeline, distributing and marketing. This had been here and we had been running them effectively. World Bank comes and does three things on that power that now you'll see how we got here. First, when they came, Shell, BP, and Chevron, who are the 50% shareholders of Kenya Refineries Limited, now Changamwe, just let's call it Changamwe Refinery, demanded to be allowed to also source oil from other, which is not refined in Kenya. They said it was becoming too expensive. And they cited the fact that they had not, Changamwe was not improving its technology fast enough like other places. So it's cheaper for them to get their crude from South Africa or straight from, when it's coming to this part, especially Dubai. Remember, that's part of the places they've done a lot of refineries and coming to Kenya directly. Now, that was not allowed because there was a monopoly. But later now, when Kibaki becomes president, we see what happened. We see that they refused to attend meetings that demanded approval of new equipment. Remember, it was 50-50% sharing between the national government and between the government of Kenya and these private providers. When there's privatization, kuna shida. Chevron, Shell, and BP. And so they stopped attending meetings, approving the purchase of the equipment, and then they said, we are not going to buy this oil because the equipment is outdated and it's expensive. We'd rather bring our more effective oil. You can see that during all this time, oil was very stable. So then they refused to come for board meetings twice. Kibaki calls them twice, they refuse. And so that leads to them disappearing. Kibaki starts looking for somebody to replace their shareholding. Because by then, apparently, the government of Kenya could not be able to put money into that, or at least buy it in a way that can manage it, because the rules and policies, those are the expectations by the World Bank. You cannot spend, because by then they had started dictating, because Kibaki had welcomed them 100%. Moi had refused, just so you know. And so, with that now in mind, Kibaki starts shopping for people to replace those ones. He got some Indian company. Libya wanted. Remember, Gaddafi was a very good friend to Africa. But the corruption element was not available with the Libyan one. So they took the Indian one. India company buys, and they do the entrepreneurship bit, where you get the business because you are connected rather than you are capable. So they got their shareholding, but they didn't have the money to do the improvement of the equipment, which is why they had bought it in the first place. Corruption. Actually, Kibaki killed it. So they didn't do their due diligence. And so later we even discover that that Asa Indian company even had Shell, BP, they had bought shares in it. So it was like an insider job inside an insider job. And so Kenya Oil Refineries closes officially that 11 September 2013, just weeks after Uhuru becomes president. So you can see this was all Kibaki. That corruption, the deal. And so it is now becomes an oil storage Kenya pipeline, but now Kenya is importing fully refined oil. That's where we killed the oil. And so from that time now, oil increases every other time. We shot from 30 shillings. Now we are at whatever amount. You can see the inflation. And because now anybody can bring, and they know we have nowhere to store it long term, and there is nothing we can do, that now goes to oil. And then let's talk of Dangote, because it's very important. He comes here pretending savior. Like now people are saying he's an African, let him do so. But he did the same thing in Nigeria. In fact, that parliament has declined to give him the same, not even going on the environmental issue. The same thing. You demand the government to fund you. So we want to repeat the same mistake that happened with Changamwe, now with Dangote. He wants the seed money to come from Kenya. And more than the seed money, he also wants to be given the monopoly. The same one Shell, BP, and whatever else had demanded. So he wants to be treated like the company wants to be treated like a state corporation rather than a private business. So it is exerting so much control over Kenya, and this is being allowed because he said he cannot invest without that protection. So he's holding Kenyans at ransom. Now, we have had a couple of arguments. One African, I'm like, nonsense. Even Kenya has been corrupted by Africans. They have been the collaborators. Dangote himself, his history, his testament. That's That's out of the way. We have been oppressed by our fellow Africans, so that's not a reason. It's like the same thing with tribe. Allow this person to come because they are your own tribe. Now we want to say we are Pan-Africanists. And we refuse to get the Libyan oil, by the way. That's the irony. And Gaddafi was not going to allow that. I'll come to that question of why he's building. He doesn't want, because that would require him to refurbish, but more importantly, he wants his own brand new shiny place. Because he says his capacity is, I don't know how many trillion liters of oil, barrels of oil. Now, this is somebody who is demanding our financing, our land and everything, and protection, so that he can build a future trillions. You can see the problem we have. People want to sell the big picture, but instead of starting with Changamwe, which the Kenyan government can on its own, and building slowly, because we will be starting from zero or negative zero and getting to somewhere where we can keep improving our production. Why is it that he wants this? Because he says it must also serve Uganda, Tanzania. So he's also making other East African nations be held at ransom to this private provider. So he wants to capture Kenya, East Africa. It is what is known as rent capitalists, rent investors. They're capitalists who just come to rent. They don't build. They just want to get our money, as much of it, and go. Because this is bound to fail the same way it failed in Nigeria. But because he's too big and he has insisted on monopoly, we are doomed. Changamwe is public. This Lamu can be given a brand new thing. It is the same thing we talked of SHA. Why not keep SHA? Why not keep NHIF, not rebrand it and transfer it? Because in that element of transfer is where you get what is known as leakage. We talked of a heist. You're an electrician, you know. During movement is where you have the most leakage, right? If you are doing a heist, when money is being transported, is when it's most insecure. And so in changing from Changamwe to Lamu, first of all, people will eat a lot of money. Changamwe, there will be no money to eat for infrastructure. Watakula nini? So they go to Lamu, a brand new place. It's the same thing with roads. That's the system. All right. Then now let's go to power. So power is captured in a different way. These people are so clever. Power is captured in two ways. Number one, first split the electricity generating, that becomes KenGen, and then you get Kenya Power. And then privatize. So that is how they were both captured. But for that to happen, they could not just allow it to happen immediately. They forced Kenya to take a loan from the World Bank to do rural electrification. Like I said, they always make sure they have an advanced game going. So rural electrification in Kenya was done immediately after Kibaki, and people were so happy. Remember, we co-paid for that electrification. It wasn't free. We co-paid. But it was also loaned so that the intensity can be increased. The moment that is done, so while it was going on, Kenyans had been allowed to provide more energy into the electric grid. That is how it spiked and became available. So Kenyans mistakenly thought that now we are going to become energy, what is it called? Fully, like capable, like efficient, not deficient, so capable. We will have energy for Kenya. However, when you have now brought in money, a loan, by the way, to fund this infrastructure loan for now electrification, that's when you do the privatization after they have used public money. So this is no different than those monies that are being given to the family banks, to equity banks and other banks from Kenya. You first make sure Wakenya were fund. So we funded for total infrastructure coverage of those utilities. And then immediately privatization, IPOs. That is how energy in Kenya was captured. I hope now you can see, that's why we're talking of, this is not a one-time thing. The plan that was laid out under Vision 2030 took a very long time. Okay, yes, energy sufficient. Took a very long time for it to mature. So what happens after privatization? So you can see the paradox they're talking about, but they don't want to address. When now you privatize, we privatize electricity shot up. Because first of all, they stopped now the private power providers from putting the electricity into the grid. The same way Shell, Chevron, and BP had said, we are not going to like be allowing these public people to play alongside us. We are going to look for our cheap outsourced means. Yeah, it's the same document. It's the same document. So they did the same. So they started buying from Uganda. They said it's cheaper than having to pay Kenyans. They were looking to consolidate the investment they had done in Uganda. They were looking for a return on their investment because they had funded it. So another thing Kenyans don't know is that regional capital is also part of the World Bank. Sisi hatujui nini inaendelea Uganda, nini inaendelea sijui Ethiopia, ama nini inaendelea Tanzania. We only know the social things. Then they are busy planning. In fact, now World Bank contracts are regional. They are not per country. And so they started now bringing the power that they had invested in to Kenya. So in other words, they killed our energy, the local energy provision from local Kenyans so that they can bring the power they had financed in Uganda. In other words, tulikuwa market, the World Bank. We were not a country, and we are not a country when as far as energy is concerned. And now you can see why prices keep spiking, and also why they are measured in the dollar. And yet Kenya has enough renewable energy sources to create its own energy. We have that. We can be able, and we proved we could. And yet now, the private sector, the investors, and those other people who gave the loans, they are enjoying mass coverage of electrification. So people say, oh, Kibaki brought electrification. No. World Bank brought it so that they could steal our energy. And that's how it disappeared. I'll give you another example. It may not be politically correct to say this, but we have coal. It is good to realize we have coal in Kenya, but a lot of Kenyans don't know we have coal. Coal could have actually become the perfect element for industrialization that they're talking about, especially in the mining regions, because it becomes a very good source of, say, copper concentrate and other elements, and it can be used in what you call the industrializing zones for pumping water, for large elements, and all this. But coal has never been used. Why? Because donors said it is dangerous for the environment. Yet, particularly those ones, when you talk of GIZ, the Germans, they still use coal up to this day. They want us to transition to green energy. We don't yet have that technology. They've kept insisting on geothermal and other areas. So let me give the paradox of geothermal, and I'm sure you can be able to contribute to this. Geothermal is not universally done. In other words, it's like we are still in the pilot stage for managing geothermal. Sure, it is there in Iceland and other nations, but within what you'd call the main world, the places that China and the rest, it's not, the technology is still very specialized. And so Kenya is being put into a very expensive, specialized means of power generation, while there are cheaper, more accessible elements of power production. I'll give you the perfect examples. Most of the Mount Kenya, Rift Valley, even Western regions keep a lot of cattle. And they keep them in padlocks, in places that can actually generate enough methane and others, whatever, for the gas, the power that can be repiped back into the grid. Also, those places, if you go to the Rakanidi and a lot of other places, you can actually generate power. You can generate from those rivers enough to fuel those places, but it's not allowed. So we have been disallowed from even exploring, not just, you could say coal, let's say it's fossil fuel, but we are not allowed to even, the only technology that Kenya is allowed and funded is geothermal. So we are more of a test subject. And for their test subjects, for their pilots to work, then they cannot allow Kenyans to be energy sufficient. We are literally a guinea pig for green power. You've seen all those makers. Solar Kenya was one of the first places to receive funding for solar technology development in the early 2000s. This was done in Kenya before it even went to China. Yet, after all those tests were done and pilots were done in Kenya, they took the production to China. So we are a guinea pig to their technology. And that is the sad part. You're waiting for mining session. Nitafika mining. We won't deal with mining today. Now, but I'll mention it as we go along. There was an argument that was inclined towards coal not being enough in terms of local reserves and the coal plant would have an expensive. No. So there are 3 studies, and I get you. There are 3 studies on the coal. First of all, by the way, coal is not that expensive if it is geared towards specific elements. Specific elements would be the coal itself being used to jumpstart, say, copper concentrate or beryllium or other large mining or agriculture, especially agriculture that requires irrigation, so that it can actually pay for itself for factory or industrial production, not for domestic heating and the rest. That investment should and shall be able to pay for itself because we already are doing zero and we are incapable of Kenya Power is not affordable or viable option to industrialization. Secondly, those studies commissioned by the same people who are opposing it because they've not violently, but virulently opposed this, then it begs the question. So the studies I have are also in that contradiction. I also have studies of the Mio Basin. They are very different. There is a reason the Chinese wanted to set up a coal plant there. A reason. I don't think, and I don't have like a hard on for Chinese people, but I don't think an industrialist, because it's not government, would come to Kenya, want to do an investment that is going to be a loss. I don't think so. So that is just my assumption here. So long-term investment. So you deny somebody their bread today because you don't think tomorrow they'll have it. Like, just give me the logic of this. Because we keep delaying things waiting for the future. And that is the problem we have here. Why then is the focus on geothermal rather than our own capacity to produce? That's the other question that we are begging. And also there are more rivers, specifically in Western Kenya, that are also capable of power generation. All right. Towards the first world, they say we are going to look at agriculture, manufacturing, and innovation. Manufacturing what? Agriculture, food, not agriculture for slave crops. Foundation for success. They've talked of governance and integrity, world-class education and skills, quality health. So it's now not universal, but quality health, and then reliable infrastructure. I think here they mean transport. Reliable infrastructure is very different from mobility. One of the things I hear people talking about is the 1 trillion, they take, is it $1 trillion or 4? They say the forever wars in the Middle East have costed the US $4 trillion. And they say within that time, China has also spent an equivalent of $4 trillion. Then they start narrating where that $4 trillion has gone to. It has gone to high-speed rail. It has gone to transport in the water, underwater, building canals, especially where rivers can easily come together and necessitate water transportation within the country. They've gone ahead to put people in the moon, or at least to go to the dark side of the moon, to put satellites, to launch their own sodium batteries, not the lithium ones. They go to the healthcare, the education, the same amount of money. So when you are looking at infrastructure, particularly the one in Kenya, it has not led to mobility. People it's now more expensive to move in Kenya than any time in history. Every day becomes more expensive because of that. We've never looked at infrastructure. What is the end game for infrastructure? It's the same way we don't look at what is the end game for education. Is it for jobs or is it for Kenya to be able to be productive? Roads are there to enable movements of goods and services. Up to now, they are still vanity projects promised by every president, every MP, every governor. Kila mtu nitawekea barabara za kwenda wapi? Singapore. Sorry, that is sarcasm. You can still go to Singapore either way. Development, finance, and investment. When you bring the word investment into this, it brings a problem. Let me explain. Investment requires either for you to have such strict rules in terms of who you let in to come to your country to deliver the investment. I'll explain. If you are an US company, you have a glass technology to produce in China, the policy is will copy it as you make it for you, and will even improve it, because they say the quality of products in China is better than most places in the world. And that is because if you bring your glass technology, see yako, the people have to, the exchange, what you call the payoff of you having to produce in China so you can make more profits, because we have educated our people, we have grown our economy, our infrastructure, people can move, we have food security, we are not struggling, food is affordable, we have housing for almost everybody, is that we produce but we copy. And so that exchange has worked very well. Give us a technology transfer and go away. You don't bring your people, no, we will do it ourselves. And so the people take specs, instructions, and contracts, and they get their goods. That is one way how you deal with investment. Bring then your money, will set up the factory according to your specifications. So that also that money is managed. And if you invest thanks to, so that is what, let's finish investment coming from outside, how that works. So it is allowed to work because you are coming to use, so if you're coming to plant anything in Kenya, you are not just going to take it, it must improve the people. If you're coming to set up our mining or our roads, by the time you leave, Kenya should be able to do better roads than you. That is the Chinese policy, and even Singapore. Now, contrast to, so the investor knows they have to leave a large chunk of investment, not just of money and jobs. So that now the way Kenyans were training for the AI models and everything, would now have even data centers, or, well, not data centers, but enough models that are coming out of Kenya. In fact, Kenyans should have been some of the first to launch their models because we were training the AIs. But that was not part of it. Consider India when it came to IT. When tasks were outsourced to India, India's IT industry grew. Now they are some of the leading IT people in the world because that was the way they were allowed to go and do the work there. Kenya doesn't, like I said, open season. Now let's go to now the investment by the government, for the government, to the people. If the Chinese government or the government invest in you as a people, then you cannot take it out. You saw that guy, the one who was selling to Apple, to yeah, we already talked about this, but I'll come back to that. The guys who tried to sell to Meta. Because the Chinese government invest in its people, if they say we are going to make EV vehicles in 5 years, engineers, chemical scientists, everybody is going to be involved to make that. But because the government has set special economic zones for that to be delivered, subsidized almost everything, trained people, then that technology belongs to China. That is how they are deflating their even economy, because technology and things become cheaper, better, more efficient. But in return, you can't take it out. That is how Kenya becomes a hatchery now for like geothermal and everything. In fact, one of the imports you should be making is geothermal technology, but we don't. We are a guinea pig. Look at all the technologies that were developed here with Kenyan resources. Now that's the opposite now. That people have come to Kenya has invested in it. We invested in rural electrification, making sure people had power, and then it was privatized and taken by people. That is literal theft. And that is the challenge and the difference between whatever happens in those countries that they are trying to admire versus what is proposed here in terms of foundations for success. Investment must be within that managed frame. We'll see when it comes to that, because we have the show notes at least, so we'll see if that is what is happening. Effective devolution. Sasa ndio wamekumbuka devolution. What does effective devolution mean? Effective devolution, from the constitution and the design of it, would be where devolution is the one that is leading. It's the dog. The national government is the wag, is the tail. When the dog is happy, the national government does this, and so on and so forth. But right now, it's the opposite. The dog is wagging the tail. The tail is wagging the dog. So that now, if the government decides we are not going to fund you, the countries have no options, hawana option. So effective devolution would mean changing the government so that the decisions are coming from the ground, not from the top. That is different from planning. The needs of the people are on the ground, they are not up there. And that's why the capture is now double. Finally, cohesion and shared purpose. Oh, this is part of that. Okay, then climate resilience, of course. This I agree with, because we can't say we don't agree with. But we need to put heritage there. All of these countries went back to their heritage. That's a foundation. In fact, finding yourselves who you were before the colonizers came. That's where they went back to. We've never done that, but tuendelee. So how expected outcome, this is now the vision that they are selling. Let me read the comment from Iswa. Kenya doesn't participate in any kind of agriculture to be sustainable, but to sustain other states according to their specific insufficiency. Yes, we've said the thing here should be food. Kenyans should eat and grow and make their own food, not agriculture, because the agriculture that they are promoting is the one where we take our mangoes, our oranges, our macadamia, our avocado to European stores, not to feed Kenya. It's the problem with Mexico right now. Because of that push of taking your products to the American supermarkets, food there is becoming more expensive. It never used to be like that. So, yeah, because they set the rules. Somebody said that and they said that correctly. All right. I'm going then to move to, what else? I don't know if we have time for the next slide. It's now an hour 26. I wanted to take a break, but this is the document. This is the one which will finish it because it's very interesting. Let me, I'm taking a pause. This is a live show, people. I've been talking for an hour, 30 minutes. We can take a break. You can type questions if you have, and then I can basically answer them. Otherwise, one moment during which we break, and then I inform the group and see what they are saying. Oh, hey, nimeona TikTok ni kama uko na fomu. Oh, right. Okay. This is not. Sorry. So let us look at the final one. It is now 9:45. So we still have an hour actually to go because this is going until 11. Kenya's road to a first world nation. So they repeat whatever they have said. There's nothing new here. So let us go to the summary. The same thing, the leap. Because why also say the leap to a first world? China took a long time. Everybody takes a long time. It's not, you don't leap. It is literally a crawl. A crawl. Because every time you are fighting against these interests, every other time you're fighting against this interest, you're fighting the pull by the Westerners, the outsiders, you're fighting your internal elites, you're fighting systems that have been held for the last over 100 years now in Kenya. You're fighting history so that you can restore balance on things that people have come to accept as normal. It is not a leap. It is a very painful crawl towards that future that you deserve. And so, beyond the public sector, as they say, the sector reforms, there are at least 3 other pillars of the transformation strategy. Let us look at them. Number 1, the first pillar is agricultural transformation. Oh, we've talked about agriculture. Let's see what they are proposing. Let's see if we are right because we have talked about it. Number 1, the emphasis will be on increasing productivity, expanding irrigation, strengthening extension services, promoting climate smart agriculture, supporting high-value crops, and linking agriculture, agro-processing industries to industrial development. What have they said here? They've said they're going to continue the same path, but now make it more expensive. None of these have said we first increase arable land. We go back to resilient crops. Resilient crops is not smart agriculture. It is literally, it is smart plus plus plus. That's why heritage is very important. Kenya, when you look at parts of Nyanza and parts of Bailuo Nyanza, I mean, because Kisii is already very much overgrown. So you increase and you put that as a crop basin, and Ukambani, you get the Mediterranean climate where you can actually have 3 harvests in a year rather than 2 with proper irrigation. That is a fact. And then also increasing parts of Mbere and Tharaka-Nithi that are dry, that are not very well optimized. That is enough to actually make Kenya sustainable. And that requires, it's not that expensive. It requires land re-evaluation and then easing the pain that is in central Kenya and Rift Valley. Let me explain that. Exactly. They are continuing the slave crop proposal. Let us look at what is in the Rift Valley. Rift Valley, central Kenya, soils are so thin now. The chemicals, it's like you are drip feeding crops to grow. But easing production so that, and it's not like they'll not be producing, but so that the pressure is not on just maize. If it is maize, you say, we need to have 4 more carbohydrates for flour. So you make sure cassava is in, just imagine how many places cassava would grow. You increase yams, you increase yorgum and millet across the country. That is one way. It's literally making us food sufficient, not this nonsense. Because if you are going to say we are going to get to a level where we link agriculture into industrial development, it's not. They don't want to mention a specific industry. And agro-processing is literally the way those countries did so that they could be able to stretch their food over the year, because most of them have winter. So when you process the malenge, the sweet potato flour or whatever to crisps, then they survive longer. So that now they are kept for longer. It is not agro-processing so that you take to other countries. No, it's so that we can say we are enjoying mangoes the entire year. We are enjoying so that children in school can actually have mangoes the entire year. When it is mango season, they get them fresh. When it's not mango season, they are still going to have mangoes. So you are bringing constant supply, but these mangoes are dried or whatever else they are dressed. Yes, soil is dead in many places, of course. And where soils are fertile, there is no irrigation and they have been deemed marginalized. So this is 100% a white narrative, an imperialist narrative. It is for us to continue growing for them the food they need, the fancy food, because it's not even their main food. It is super crops. They're talking of agriculture, of nuts, right? Macadamia, of avocado, of fruits. Not the food they eat, but the food for the rich there, because even there, they are food deserts. The food there, the quality is very low. And food for the masses there is GMO grown. It's that mass-produced food. It's not. That's why we are here to provide food for the rich in Western nations, not to feed Kenyans. My dog wants to move. Let me move him to sleep with me. I'm live. Okay, I'll charge for you. Okay, good night. Bye. All right. So let's go to the second one. The second pillar is industrialization. Tusikia wamesema hatu. Through manufacturing and value addition. Really? Okay, I'm very pissed off because if what comes to industrialization is value addition. Let's go. Kenya must expand manufacturing, deepen industrial capabilities, strengthen export competitiveness, and position itself as a regional production hub. Competitiveness, we said it's an external thing. So let's look at this. Let me not jump. Sorry, let me not jump. I was just pissed off. Emotion scandal. Let's focus. The issue is through manufactured value addition. Kenya's industrialization is being pegged to agriculture, which we are not also food sufficient. The soils are almost dead. because they can barely sustain anything, and we don't even have enough food. And food is now being imported from Uganda and other countries. And then you say the industrialization is going to be pegged on first correcting that, where we have huge land injustices that have not even been addressed. The land optimization in Kenya and the planning of agriculture is never done. They don't even talk of that. And then they say, so we can only industrialize when that happens. As if we don't have minerals. As if you don't have other things that can be done. Sure, I understand if you said we are going to use agriculture and textile, because that's an industry. Industrialization is not being able to turn your mango into whatever. No, that is just food preservation, extending its life. Industrialization is taking a crop from its form and transforming it into another thing. So you take cotton from that bud, create fabric that makes clothes. That's an industry. That's an industry. It is something that you can say we have a textile industry. We have an apparels or skin industry, whatever. So textile could include leather. We have, what other industry? We have a mining industry for gemstones. They don't have to be copper. You can just decide Kenya is going to factorize its crafts, because we have all these women and men who can do kiondos, carvings and all this, and use real stones and gemstones, and that becomes part of both the textile but also crafts. And now you down all the way to the ground, get people to work to support that industry. But not to say that they have not even mentioned which industry this would be. That is a tragedy. Mimi hapa aki iga anyang nyongo, and you are a professor, although I know it's not you. The third pillar is technology, innovation, and the knowledge economy. Let's see. Knowledge economy. Future competitiveness will increasingly depend on technology adoption, research, digital transformation, artificial intelligence, innovation, all the buzzwords. Oh my gosh, ecosystem. There is no word that is not a buzzword. Science-based development. Kenya must therefore strengthen research institutions, universities, technical training, financing mechanisms to get. Did they say that strengthen research institutions, universities, technical training systems, innovation, and financing mechanisms? Together, these pillars aim to create a productive economy capable of generating high incomes, quality jobs, and sustained competitiveness. Technology, innovation, and the knowledge economy. Knowledge has now become an economy. Knowledge is a factor of production. These are all factors of production. These are not pillars of development. Technology is nothing if it is not used to be productive. It is nothing. Let me tell you the people who have benefited from AI so that you can see the difference. What I mean that technology is nothing if it is not used for production. Take India versus the US. Which of those two countries has benefited from technology? Which countries? Which countries have enjoyed the fruits of technology? Even South Korea, they've benefited because they produce the phones, they make the technology. Compare that to the US. Sure, Alphabet and the rest are in the stock market. Apple, Alphabet, and whatever. The production is in China. The technologies are outsourced in India. Samsung and whatever, they make the chips and all that. They are consumers. And then when the technology and innovations are done, they are quote-unquote disruptive. No, not quote-unquote, it's disruptive. But disruption, we know, is a way to go around the regulations that keep a nation stable and provide people safety net. If you look at, say, Uber and the rest of the people, they are like Manamba digital, right? Manamba ni mtu anakuambia uende na yeye haendi. Just connect you to the next bus evil. But they don't contribute to the movement, mobility, the production of transportation within those governments. They are actually helping to kill more public transportation in those countries. Where it thrives best is where there is no public transportation. They've come to replace public transport as a public good for those countries. Literally. These are enablers. They are not pillars. Technology must be linked to productive. Look at now what you're calling the AI bubbles. Tutamaliza hapo. tuko hapa. The bitter mom, don't I love your name because it is the perfect name for this thing. Don't be bitter. Don't be bitter. Okay, be bitter, but we are not giving up. That's why we are interrogating this document. I think it will provide for us a very good, basically, understanding of the entire economy. We will be able to know what is wrong because these are enablers. So let's look at the AI, productive AI versus consumptive AI, because this was one of the things, especially 2 months ago when I started saying AI in the US is consumptive. It doesn't lead to a lot of what you call real world impacts and results, production. It leads to productivity, that thing they keep talking about, not production. Productivity is very different from production versus Chinese AI. But let us look at those two to see how they are crafted. Ndio muone the difference. No. When it comes to AI and why the bubble is now, once it's been popped, it's going. It's because, first of all, in the US, AI is based off AI infrastructure as the investment. They are building the technology for what you'd call the brain. They want AI to replace the brain. It should be able to think and function, have that executive power. All God intelligence. That's the AI that is being modeled. We have no problem with that, but that's what it is. But that brings it its own problem. So think of AI right now as it is, as a very effective secretary. You can tell them what to do and they'll give you the results. A researcher. They'll give you the diagnosis. They are basically an analyst. Very good. That's what the models are. But they cannot think for themselves in a way that they can execute functions. They can help you write a code. They can do all these things that are already within the things you instruct people, but the output requires you then to, because when your secretary tells you to do something, somebody has to be on the shop floor doing the thing. So once you think of them as the brain. Even if you do an app, it must be executed. So productive AI is legs, stomach, organs, things that now support the brain to work. So Chinese AI, which is productive AI, how are they making money and reporting results? By selling data centers. In fact, most of them were coming from the data centers and chip makers. So those ones made a lot of money, but it also went into a bubble because, like in Korea, South Korea, they assumed that they are going to always be chips, but then China brings their own chips, and then of course now people are realizing the AI, but the Chinese competition is messing them up. But also it was a bubble because it is the same companies that were investing in each other because they needed the US stock market to keep appearing like it's growing, which is not based on reality because these things have barely come to life. They are just still subscription models. And remember, it is something that requires every time engineers and people to be there to input because they never get consistent. So it has its own elements of execution. We are not going to get to the technical. We're just looking at its operational model in terms of the economy of a country or a sector. Moving on to what you call productive AI, it's different. First of all, it's not led by the private sector. It is led by government-sponsored, as you said, special zones to produce that kind of AI. There's a lot of support and government effort. Now, the other thing is, in the US, it is companies are rushing to be the first to get ahead to create the God intelligence. In China, it's shared and open source because it's funded by the people. In this, you decide you're going to make an AI that can grab hands, that can pick a chopstick or something and be able to do this, right? Can function like a hand to do real world things. So to drive, to run a factory, to do like, a factory just to dip. So in that, it becomes something that in future models, it's open source. If you ever want something that has that motion, you don't have to create new. You can always borrow that, then now expand. Maybe it does this, but also does this kind of thing. That is how simplistic it is. So it is not complicated in terms of execution. It's repetitive, but it also leads to it is directed to what is called IoT, Internet of Things. It can make a camera move and track people. That is the kind of AI they're making. If it's for security now, it is not, there's still the data analysis, but it's not AI that makes you to be able to do gate and all this analysis, no. To be able to be counter surveillance, no. Yes, it is still there, but the AI that they are pushing and scaling is that one that will see somebody and monitor them, move them, call the police, do things that are very simple, straightforward, can transport things can be able to be your waiter and so on and so forth. That's the AI that is. It is basically to replace manual work or dangerous work. It's so because most of factory work, as you know, is repetitive. It doesn't require a lot of high function. It just requires you to be able to have the physical ability to do the work and to keep doing the work without getting exhausted. And so that is what it is. And so it is also being linked very well to IoT. So real things, physical things like robots, like waiters, and all these other things like cameras and trucks and movement. That is the AI, and that is the difference. Now, that is the difference when technology. So the benefit, the reason now all of a sudden they seem not to be ahead is because that is productive AI. It is an enabler to work. This one here is a vision to create a godlike thinking machine. And yet remember, they say right now the knowledge that is on the internet has already been taken, occupied, used, and now what is coming out fresh is based off what the AI already produced. And so there is a limit to that, but we are not going to go into the technical issues. I was just bringing the issue of technology is not so much a pillar, but an enabler. It is not the thing, you build it to enable production of maybe mining works, to deal with things that you can't do, like drones and other things. So farm work, back-breaking work, or basically toxic environment, to be able to function in such an environment. So that's the kind of AI that is coming out of that country. So before we go to chapter 1, because now, why Kenya needs a new vision? No, we don't. Kenya needs to scrap its visions and go back. But Kenya does need, so we'll look at the lie they've told themselves, because of course, besides being funded to produce a new vision and also for as a vanity project, why else are they doing the new vision? We'll look into that next time we start, because I think now we've done a good introduction into this system. Show notes will be available. And if there are any other questions, we can have them. I want to thank everybody who came. I want to check the time. Which one am I using? Okay, 10:04. All right. We have questions. You have something that you want us to look at. That's fine. Let me first deal with the screen. Proceed. Okay. Is there a question I haven't done? No. All right. So why is Dangote building a new one if the old one can be revived? Yeah, you can't make money just like that. Okay, everybody, if we have no other question, we'll beg to disappear. The next section, I might hold it on Monday. If not, tomorrow. If there is demand for it, I'll direct people to come and watch, leave their comments. We can spend time answering them, and basically now start making YouTube the new home. I'm sure we'll start getting more people and more people coming here. So nimeshukuru sana, and at 10:05 we say good night and good luck. I hope you have learned something. I've also learned something, and yeah, all the best. Ciao. Bye bye.